Fear of the Lord actually is exactly what it sounds like. It's more than that, but it's not less than that. The Scripture tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, Proverbs 9:10. We also know that the fear of the Lord, as the psalmist tells us, is clean. It is sanctifying. The fear of the Lord is the great corrective to so much theological nonsense. It's the great corrective to heresy. What if heretics understood the due penalty of their error? What about those who simply take the things of God lightly? Look at the Old Testament. God kills people for taking his things lightly. It was a covenant of fear, and he feared me. The fear of the Lord is one of these things we better come back to again and again and again, because it turns out that in the job description of the preacher, the fear of the Lord is foundational, it's paramount, it's primary. There it is, staring us in the face. He feared me. Martin Luther described two different kinds of fear. He wanted to distinguish between the fear of the Lord, which is right and righteous, and the fear of the Lord, which is wrong. And so Martin Luther said there are two kinds of fear. There's servile fear and there's filial fear. And to update it into our contemporary culture, servile fear is the kind of fear that one would feel and rightly feel if one were taken by ISIS. That would be a servile fear. That would be the fear of being in the hands of one unrighteous who means you harm. And that is not the fear that is described in the Scriptures, the fear of the Lord. As Luther rightly said, that's a filial fear. And you'll notice the filial, this refers to a son. This is the fear a son has of his father, or in a family situation. It's the fear you would have for the one in authority, for the patriarch. And it's the fear a child ought to have of a parent. And that's a different kind of fear altogether. That's a fear that is sanctifying. It's clean. That's a fear that is the beginning of wisdom. Luther said there's an eternity of difference between servile fear, being in the hands of the unrighteous who mean you harm, and the filial fear, being in the hands of a parent who will correct and who will discipline and who will limit and who will order and who will command, but out of love. Out of love and devotion, as well as authority. The fear of the Lord, in that sense, is the beginning of all wisdom. The fear of the Lord, rightly understood, is clean. It's sanctifying, and that's where the preacher has to begin. The fear of the Lord is rooted in the fundamental understanding of who he is, and it's the rightful response of the creature to the Creator. And yet we need to recognize we're living in a cultural moment. We're living in a time in which only servile fear appears to be even in the imagination of most people. And by the way, a little footnote here, this is a part of the inevitable loss that comes in the breakdown of marriage and family and fatherhood. There are so many children who have never actually experienced the kind of filial fear that makes a child secure and raises a child in nurture. There's so many people who've never even experienced anything like filial fear. All they know is servile fear. To them we must preach the gospel.